So folks, with that, I warmly welcome you to this new video. You may have seen the wonderful video by Nico from the Car Paint Monkeys, specifically about the polishing machine, beginner tips, particularly the point about the support plate standing still. How does it affect the polishing machine? When the support plate stands still in eccentric mode, and he did a small test, and I will link the video again below in the pinned comment. To summarize briefly, still take a look at it again. He polished two sides, spending about 20-25 seconds on each side. At one point, he lightly set the machine down so that it could run freely. This means that the eccentric area is driven, resulting in a wonderful rotation. And this rotational movement can indeed stop, for example, if too much pressure is applied to the machine or if you drive up to an edge. You know how it is, you drive over a bump and then the pad gets pressure from the side and it just stops. That's why I've always told you in all my tutorials to make a little mark on the side, because then you can see exactly, okay, stop, now. If my pad stays completely still, it might be that I'm applying a bit too much pressure or I'm polishing heavily against an edge. However, in the video, Nico shows that the result can still be satisfactory even though the support plate remains stationary. This is absolutely correct because the stroke, due to its size, 12 mm at 15 mm and 21 mm, still generates a lateral movement that is driven. Only the rotation is missing. However, this also has a few disadvantages, and in the video, I want to shed some more light on the whole matter. I wish you a lot of fun, but now the question is, why does the pad still polish? You saw that in Nico's video. Because the pad, when it has a stroke of 15, or the support plate, please do not do this, but I will show you now behind the machine. Do not place it on your paint surfaces, but here on my test hood, it works. Even if the pad is not rotating, let's take this point. The pad does not rotate, but you still have a so-called zigzag movement. Let's get straight to the point. Maybe it will be easier for you to understand. The plate does the following. It no longer spins as much. Instead, the plate moves back and forth very quickly. This creates a very slight motion, similar to hand polishing, with a constant back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The larger the stroke, the greater the polishing performance. This means that when a 21 machine is used, that single point on the polishing pad moves rapidly back and forth when we place the pad on it. That single small point moves extremely quickly. This already achieves a polishing performance. That's why you saw in Nico's video that there is also a cut present, even though the plate hardly rotated. That means we practically have this movement there, very fast. And how can you equip the whole thing with greater effectiveness? Of course, if it rotates, that means you have a very, very fast stroke movement, plus the entire system rotates. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate this with my hand, or I would dislocate my wrist. But I can show you a picture where you can clearly see the movement. So, when the pad stands still, there is a zigzag movement, but the cut is still somewhat present, definitely. However, adding the rotation significantly increases the overall performance in terms of the cut. That's a brief overview of the theory. Let's move on to the surface. I will repeat Nico's test in fast forward to show you another difference. He then compensated for the missing rotational movement with pressure. It simply means that this, what I will now call the zigzag movement, occurs here just because the pad is no longer rotating, but the stroke that prevails can certainly be supported by applying the right amount of pressure here. That's why we are going to conduct the test again in the same way. Here, I go over it completely without pressure, letting the pad run really smoothly. Let it run freely, and then I will go over the other side in the same way. The same time or the same path, and we apply some real pressure and let the machine stand still. So we apply so much pressure that the pad comes to a complete standstill in rotation. But the stroke is still present, so for you, just briefly and compactly, 4 times the speed now in that field. Normal pressure, just very lightly, the pad can run without any issues, the same time and also the same distance with a lot of pressure. The support plate stops very, very often. Let's take a look. So, what we can clearly see here, again between the unpolished surface and the polished surface, is that the very fine superficial scratches have definitely been removed logically. And we'll go over here and you can see that due to the increased pressure, definitely more. Scratches have been removed. I think you can see it well here. Very nice to see. Here, they are also not 100% gone, but you can clearly see that much more has been left behind. Although the support part on the side has already remained quite a lot. And we have that simply because the lifting movement is still there. So the pad and the machine are still in motion. It also means that if the scratches are too deep, as is the case now, it is simply a disadvantage of such a machine that if the backing pad stops, you won't get the full performance out of the system. And that's what I was getting at. And that's why I wanted to expand on this topic a bit with you. Now we will simply repeat the test again with the DA15. I'm going to mark my square here again, so I'll add a little more up here.
And now to field number 3, again the same duration, but full pressure, still, the support plate is rotating.
So, we're going to polish it out again. This is just the theory, folks, because we would of course do one more cross pass and so on. But we need to make it comparable, and that's why we simply work with a cross path. So, now let's take a look at this. We have the side again. Can we get a little closer? There. Also, here is the comparison. Clearly, more residual scratches. Now let's go over here. This is still the original area. And now let's go over here, and I believe you can see wonderfully, and that's what I was aiming for. Look, there are clearly fewer scratches here than on the side. Like, here you can see it nicely again. I'm trying to capture it in a way that you can see it really well, so you can see it flashing here. I'm going to step back a bit. Maybe from the side? Exactly. The angle is better here. Look here. You can see the scratches flashing everywhere now. And here you see you have a very, very nice, clear result. So it's really great to see. Let's take another look down here. You can see it. Look at that. And I believe the result, or the difference between the 3 surfaces, is clearly visible here. I found the topic that Nico brought up really fascinating. That's why I wanted to show it to you in the test a bit more in detail. Also, the difference between a free-running machine without pressure, which runs smoothly, and one with a lot of pressure. However, the machine stops very quickly. We had the XFE here as an example, and a machine that works with a lot of pressure or can work with a lot of pressure if desired, and yet it can withstand this, allowing it to practically maintain the rotational movement. A beautiful difference has been observed. The difference between no pressure or running smoothly and pressure and stopping is definitely already noticeable. But the classification actually consists of very weak cutting performance, average cutting performance, and strong cutting performance, because of course at this point, the rotational movement. This is also relevant. Just to give you a bit of theoretical background, additionally, when you get a polishing machine that tends to stop very quickly from the rotational movement, you naturally want to compensate for that with pressure. I always say that pressure is the last resort. Normally, such a machine should run beautifully due to its power and also achieve wonderful results. But if you have a machine that stops very quickly, what do you naturally do? You have to compensate for this with pressure on the machine head. This means you have a very, very strong load throughout the entire mechanics of the machine. Just imagine, you want to hand polish with a polishing aid like this, put the pad on, and really press down hard on the surface. Since you're not getting the performance you want from the polish and the pad, you just press even harder. And your arm is practically the gearbox. Motor, mechanics here in this machine. Is that the case with you? And what happens if you rub too hard on the surface while hand polishing, too quickly, with too much pressure? At some point, the system here starts to hurt. And that's exactly how it is here in this system. If you do this permanently to this machine, the system here will suffer very, very quickly. The mechanics inside will not be able to withstand this in the long run, as it heavily burdens the system. The entire shafts that are in here, the connection between the backing plate and the mechanics here, that all comes loose. You can already see it with my XFE, that there is a bit of play here. Do you hear that? And that's just one point. You are putting extreme stress on the machine. The second point, which I believe Andreas also mentioned in the video, was that polishing tools respond differently to the strong pressure you might need to apply because the machine cannot ensure the rotational range. Different polishes also react differently. We work on scratch reduction using this rotational movement with maximum performance. When it comes to finishing, we go very gently over the surface. Everything is relaxed. We don't need this extreme scratch performance, but we are always talking about the area where we want to remove many scratches. And that's where the polishes differ. There isn't just one polish that reacts this way and another that reacts that way. Rather, it will be a bit different for all of them. Therefore, there are polishes that react quite unpleasantly to strong pressure. And how can this, for example, manifest? By getting an extreme haze on the surface. So you have a very, very high coefficient of friction during polishing, depending on what you are using. And then you have an ultra-intense haze on the surface, and it will definitely be necessary to go over it again, at least with a finish polish. Maybe the haze is so strong due to your pressure that you might even need to take an additional intermediate step. So there are really very different things. It really depends on the polish. Some polishes already have a relatively good level of gloss by default. So they can also go quite far into the finish with high pressure. However, there are polishers who say that if you press here again, at some point, I would turn into sandpaper and create so many holograms and a haze that you would have to go over it again. Therefore, pressure is not always advantageous when applied to the machine. So again, the point is, when you get a machine, pay attention to it. Use the experience to choose a machine that can handle this pressure, but does not necessarily require it. I hope you understand what I mean. And the third important point that is added to this system, besides the polishing and the machine, is the pad. This means that if you use a so-called low quality or weaker pad here, or something that is not of high quality, specifically referring to this foam, it simply happens that this pad becomes so warm within seconds and suffers so much in its foam structure that the cut drops significantly because the pad becomes extremely soft. It also means that for the pad, it is an immense strain when it is necessary to apply significant pressure on the surface because the machine simply cannot handle it. The pad gets so compressed that it might even fly off the backing plate or become so hot that the Velcro detaches, or it becomes so soft that it presses completely against the surface. The backing plate with the Velcro can get so close to the surface that the small teeth are no longer effectively kept away from the surface by the pad, resulting in tiny micro scratches on the surface. And if you've ever polished a high-gloss B-pillar and noticed, no matter which polishing machine you use, that when you shine a light on it, you see very fine little micro scratches, always like this, zap, 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 like little bites, like little mouse bites, so quick, 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 in a circle, then you know that the pad might have been too soft and you pressed too hard on the surface, causing the hook and loop fasteners on it to rub significantly against the surface through the pad. And that happens when you have to apply too much pressure. And additionally, the pad cannot separate from each other. So, the surface on which it is polished and the Velcro plate press together so strongly that the pad is already compressed to 4 to 5 millimeters here. Therefore, this whole issue of pressure is a very, very complicated matter. But I can tell you one thing, there is no one-size-fits-all solution for this. You just have to try it out. You'll notice that some machines really run very, very well. They just deliver the power. They provide you with what you need in terms of speed and rotational speed. And they can maintain this rotational speed even when you want and need to work with additional pressure. And there are machines that just stop very, very quickly and firmly. So what do you do when the pad stays still? You keep pressing down more and more, the pad becomes flatter, and you end up with an unsightly result. I hope the video was able to give you a deeper insight. Be sure to check out Nico's video as well. He demonstrated it wonderfully. Basically, what we did down here is what Nico showed in his video. Still, take a look at it again. I will link it for you below. Greetings to Nico, and also considering the factor of what happens when we have a polishing machine that does not stop quickly, and this rotational movements, which are generated by centrifugal forces, can be ensured even more strongly. I believe that was a very, very insightful video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please leave a thumbs up. I would be very, very happy. Don't forget to subscribe. If you have more questions about this topic, about stopping here and so on, then definitely leave them in the comments below. And one can clearly say that the smaller the stroke is, and therefore, that is the question that has come up time and again, especially regarding the issue of pad sticking, and that happens the smaller the stroke is. The smaller the stroke, the faster the machine comes to a stop when the motors are not strong enough, because the smaller the stroke, the smaller the forces that can set the pad in motion. This must then be balanced through speed, or for example, the force that the machine provides. That means if you stop a machine at 8 millimeters, 9 millimeters, the polishing performance decreases faster than stopping at 15 meters. Because of course the movement here is much greater than here. Therefore, you should choose a machine that can also have 9mm, but has enough power to definitely compensate for that at least. I believe you understand what I mean. But I'll just link you a few things below where I can definitely give you the green light, that you won't have this effect of constantly struggling with stationary slot adjusters. Until then, folks, take care. Your Sebastian. Ciao.